The popularity of the genre has led to the development of new business models that are of interest to many in the publishing community. But they're all having tea. The several subgenres that exist within the umbrella of graphic books will also be taken up for discussion. The presence of graphic books in Indian languages, the distribution of graphic books in general, and the prospects for new publishers and creators, such as illustrators and designers, in the genre will also be explored by the panelists. The panel is being chaired by Pratik Thomas, and the panel members are Apupan, who said his name was George, Kartika VK, Shriya Ghate, Vidyun Sabhane, and Vivek Goel, who was not able to be here with us, so he had to cancel on account of family emergency. I'll just introduce Pratik, who's chairing the session, and he will introduce the other panel members. They'll all introduce themselves. Lazy chair. Anyway, that's nice. But will you hold on to the mics? He doesn't want the table. They're a very different group. So they didn't want all these formalities of table and introductions and see, they're in their own world.
Hello, sorry. Yeah.
No, it's okay. So Pratik, along with his wife Tina, is the co-founder of Studio Kokachi, a small independent storytelling house based out of Cochin and Bangalore. By collaborating with a diverse pool of creators and storytellers from across India, Studio Kokachi's work spreads into comics, children's books, feature film, and animation. Before moving to Kokachi, Pratik co-founded and established the wonderful Manta Ray, where he co-created the graphic novella Hush, the comic anthology Mixtape, and also contributed to the Small Picture in Mint. So over to you, Pratik.
Hi, good evening, everybody. We've already done this session twice before in various parts of the venue. And as George was saying, I think it's already publishing next, where they put the graphic novel discussion in the evening. Most Litfest put us in the morning because we are the first session, most Litfest, because people don't come on time and nobody's interested in comics. So at least, yeah, we're all here. So Kartika is you guys should do it.
He's positively blushing. Why are you doing this?
No, because,
Okay, so I'm Kartika. I'm the publisher at HarperCollins India. And we publish graphic novels as part of our publishing program. We publish, among others, Apupan, whose second work with us, Aspirus, just came out a month ago. And we publish other graphic novelists like Amrita Patil, Sarnath Banerjee, Vishwajyoti Ghosh, and various others.
I'm Apupan. I make graphic novels. I get published by Kartika. I try to make this comic universe, I'm at it. Been at it for a while. It's called Hala Hala. I've got 3 books out on Hala Hala. They are not sequels. They're all standalone books. And I'll keep making more books. And there are some syndicated comics here and there, magazine stuff and all. Still not able to survive on comics, so we help ourselves with other commercial work and all. I think we'll discuss more of that here because it's called business of graphic novels, right? I don't really get the business, but yeah, we'll see.
Hi, I'm Vidyun. I make comics and or graphic novels, whatever you like to call them. My personal work is mostly based on research into visual narrative traditions, but the reason I'm here is because I've started a comics publishing project, as I like to call it, in Delhi called Captain Bijli Comics, and we are coming out with a series of comic books and anthologies. So the recent one we did was Dogs, and the upcoming one will be published in collaboration with Yoda Press, which is a collection of non-fiction comics set in India.
I'm Shriya Ghate. I'm the editor of Tinkle Digest, and I'm from Amar Chitrakatha. So under Amar Chitrakatha, the umbrella, we have, of course, Amar Chitrakatha, Tinkle Magazine, and Tinkle Digest.
Okay, so when the reason I put together a panel like this is because everybody comes from, we are all comics, but also doing different things. Like Shriya is working in Tinkle Digest, and as far as I know, like she's the only person who's working in comics for children. And what's interesting is also that so we all have read Tinkle at some point of time, and because of the way Tinkle is marketed to children, as adults we don't get to read it. But I was reading her comic recently after we got in touch, and she's actually breaking away from what Tinkle used to do all these years. So, and she's, I think, is a very fresh voice in the children's comic space, especially to sit in Tinkle, which is like under ACK, and they've got the entire tradition trying breaking it. So that's interesting about what she does. Vidyun is, I think, on the forefront of a mini comics revolution. So mini comics are things which you like. You basically make these comics and either photostat them or you print them in very small print runs and you try and sell it directly to friends or your community or at events. She's grown from a small comic called Mice and Men, and now she's like editing, contributing to multiple books. But her heart is somewhere in non-fiction, which is, you know, when comics everybody looks at it as fiction, but she's very much steeped in non-fiction as like one of her core things, and she's trying to bring comics and visual narratives into that. So that's exciting. And Apupan, yeah, so he's a creator. He's not like you're saying, the business of comics is very different because he's tied up with two. He first got published with Bluffed, where Rakesh comes from, and then he's now with Harper. So his perspective on comics, the kind of world he's creating, the business of it, how he survives as an artist and as a creator is very different from the way others work. And this is the first time, so Vidyun, Apu and I have been like discussing on comics because we met in other panels. Kartika is in Harper, right? And they've got, I think, tons of titles coming, but she's actually chosen to like bring out comics at, I think, regular intervals, and some, I think some of the most illustrious, like Amrita Patil and Apupan, are probably two of the big names in comics, and they both come from, I think, Vishwajit is from you. So like the four big names in comics in India. So there's Sanat Banerjee, who had came out first, and then Vishwajyoti Ghosh, and Amrita Patil and Apupan. These are probably the four big names in comics. Yeah, not necessarily in that order, yes. But these are creators who are recognized, and so they've, at least three of them have come from Harper. So she's got probably different perspective on why comics, what do they see as a big publisher in the entire thing. So firstly, because I don't know how many of you are aware of the comics industry and are aware of comics in general, and so the one first question, and I'm basically leading the discussion with a set of questions. So why comics? I mean, why have you chosen comics? Each of you, like, why have you chosen comics as a medium when, because you're a writer, I'm not as a part of Tinkle, but as a creator, why comics? What is it about the medium that?
I really like the fact that I have to collaborate with an artist. I like the teamwork aspect of it. I like the fact that it's dynamic. I like the fact that I bring a certain vision as a writer, and then the artist works with that vision and comes up with something else, and the product that you get at the end has its own life and its own character. So that is what appeals to me about comics.
Yeah, personally, that's for me also. Like, I'm a writer, and what happens is that the joy of creating a comic is basically seeing something you thought in your head, like, brought out completely different, which is going very different for Apupan, because he's like, when as writers we write scripts, and our scripts are probably like similar to film scripts, so we never draw it out, or we do very bad drawings. But like for a solo writer, artist like Apupan, his process is completely different. So yeah, I think.
So the question is, as someone who makes comics or someone who brings comics out? Both.
I mean, why this medium?
For me, I somehow stumbled into comics. I was first studying Joe Sacco's work, and then I went for a couple of workshops and decided to make comics. But in retrospect, I think I enjoy the medium as a writer because it enables me to speak to a much wider audience than just prose would. And that has become in time very important to me.
Okay, following up there, but comics as such has a very small audience in India than...
Yeah, but the kernel must be what you want to do, not what exists.
Why comics? I wanted to tell stories, so I was in Bombay studying and all, and doing economics and commerce. In Bombay, you can't really avoid film, so I went and tried to see how they make these films, and that was enough. I spent about a few months. Yeah, that's not the way I wanted to tell any story. And then I tried animation, and I needed like about 400 people under me to like do something, and I tried on my own. Over a year, I made something which was 15 seconds long. So that also didn't really work, but the story is still waiting. Then like bang opposite of what she was saying. I don't like to work with anybody. I like to sit at home and do my own work. So that's what comic allows me. Like I can just sit and create my own thing, take as much time. I feel like I have complete control over it also, because when you get into film and animation, you know how it is. It will get watered down a lot. There are so many people involved, the sound and everything involved. It's much more of a collective output. I'm very selfish that way, so I like my output to be like totally my own. And that's why comics.
Okay, so following up. So this is something that I was discussing with Shreya yesterday, like, and she's now editor at Tinkle. And when she comes out with a new script, so who's going to edit her stuff? Because there is no editor above her. Okay, so then she said that she basically talks to her team and her team gives her feedback. Like when I write scripts, I don't have an editor also, but I've got like a brain trust of 5 close friends whose sensibilities I believe, and I send the work to them, they give me feedback. So for you, Apupen, when you don't want to share your work, how does it work? Do you ever have a feedback mechanism while you're making the work?
Yeah, it's first a pencil storyboard kind of thing, and I usually leave it there for a while, because if there's something odd about it, it'll strike you. You won't be able to sleep properly with that pencil thing there, just sticking there in your head, you know. So you want to go back and iron it out and all. So that's a long process, and once that thing is ripe or it's ready for the plucking or something, that's when you get to the final on the paper. And then once I'm sure, I try to go all out with the paper, with the finishing and everything, so that just with the finishing, it just looks like it's totally finished. You know, nobody wants to nobody needs to, or nobody feels like they should put any input there right there. So I've been safe so far like that. I think convince people that, you know, that's the product. The thing is, I would like to approach it more like a painting. So I come from that kind of a background where I want to do drawings, and I want to explore in that. If I'm doing a painting, yes, I have done my research beyond behind that and all, and I've put out a painting. Now, if I start discussing it too much, I'm a little scared that I'll go into my old advertising days and all, where I start making things to feed the market. You know, so I mean, there are definitely easier ways for me to make my comics more appealing, and you know, it's been suggested to me also. But there are many people doing it, and they seem to be much better and more comfortable than me at doing it. So I'd stick to this. It helps me be much more peaceful with myself.
And okay, so since you're doing that, right, but you're working with Harper, who's much like a big publisher, right, and they've obviously got mainstream aspirations, and you've got an editor like Ajita. I don't know if Kartika actually sees your work before publishing, so Ajita takes care of it, yeah. So has there ever been a point in the 2 books of Halhala and Asperus where she's actually come back and told you that, you know, can we change this? And I'm not talking about, okay, change font, change color. I'm saying like actual storytelling feedback. Or even if is there a close friend who actually sees the final product before it's sent to print? Is there a process? Has that happened?
When I went into it, I was a little wary. But she's normally very cool about the story itself, because I mean, I've also gone through it many times. But there are, I like the way Ajita gives feedback, because she's inside the story when she's giving the feedback. So for example, there's this superheroine girl who's, fighting this big, huge demon guy and thrashing him left, right and center. So Ajita thought that her arms looked a little too skinny in couple of frames, you know, like how can she beat this guy up if she's so skinny? I also thought about it, like maybe, yeah, you know, I put on a little bit more muscle on her arms after that and all. That kind of stuff is good, I think. It makes that world more real. You know, that is what you're doing. You're making that world more believable. It has to be a convincing world, because most of the stories that I'm doing are also silent. So if you don't trust me as an artist, then you don't go beyond page 1. You just think that, okay, you don't get a conclusion there, and you just stop reading there. So these kind of things help there. Needs to be
Kartika, why comics? Personally, because everybody, all the big publishers, Penguin, Hachette came out with Chimpanzee. I don't know if they come out with anything else. Penguin started with Sarnath's work, and then they followed with Ayodhya, which is Ashok Banker's thing. And then you guys have brought out your own books, Curry, which is one of my favorite, I think one of the best comics that actually graphic novels, if you want to call it, that came out in India. Then there's Adi Parva, you actually got the rights for Chester Brown and you brought it to India. And then there's Simeon right now by Vikram Balagopal. I'm sure I'm missing some of the books also. Yeah, right. Yeah, but I'm saying so. Is there a personal decision that you like to read comics, or is it also because you're the publisher and your competitors also bring out comics and there's this huge comics thing around the world? Are you also doing it because of that?
I actually owe my starting in comics in India to Sarnath Banerjee, who one day called me and said, I want to do a graphic novel, will you publish it? And I was in Penguin then. So I didn't know what a graphic novel was. And I said, okay, I have no idea what you're talking about, but I didn't know him either. I didn't know who he was. But he had a fellowship of some sort. I think it was a McCarthy. He was on the McCarthy. And he needed me to look at the material and say that we might publish it, in which case he would actually get the fellowship. So it was, so I said, well, I don't know what you're talking about, but I'll try. Then I went to David, who was a publisher, David Davidar, and I said, David, there's this guy who wants me to publish a graphic novel. He says an editor, and I have no idea what he's talking about, so tell me what to do because it sounds interesting. And David said, well, you should look at it, go and read Mouse. And when you read Mouse, you know you're in it for life then, because there's no getting out of graphic fiction after that. So I was lucky. I just got into it because somebody pushed me into it, and then somebody else said I should read the right book to set me off. And David was, he is an incredible publisher. So he said, do it. If you think it works, go try it. And it was wild. It was like editing something that you had no idea what was going to come. And Corridor is not exactly Mouse, So it was really funny. The whole thing, when I look back, was like not knowing anything about what I was doing. But somehow it all came together. We have a great team in Penguin. Everybody said, well, let's do it. The production guys took real interest. And then it became a book that everybody was very proud of. And Sarnath then went on to do a lot of interesting stuff. So I actually started up there. And then when I moved to Harper, by then I was hooked. So I knew that I wanted to build a list there. And Kari happened as the first of that list. And then there was no stopping us. And then I found Ajita, which is also a great part of our journey, because Ajita just drowns in graphic fiction and non-fiction. She knows her stuff. So now I have a colleague who's now the editor for that, so I can just leave it to her and she finds the books and she publishes them really well.
So I didn't know that you were the editor of
Corridor.
Yeah. But did you actually do editing, or did...
Yes, Sarnath cannot write to save his life. He's like, I don't mean right. I mean his spellings are all off, and even now he writes merrily wrong spellings and wrong whatever, which he of course makes a joke out of publicly, so I'm not giving away anything. But so then you felt like you could edit because you knew there was language you could edit. With Apupan it's very different. You're talking about silent stuff where you just look at the art and admire it and then don't quite know what more you can help with. Where there's text, you're in slightly more comfortable territory, so you can help with the chronology, the linearity of the narrative, the frames that are missing, or where the logic jumps. So you can actually be an editor with some sort of contribution to the text.
But that's because of your background as a prose editor,
Yes, I suppose so. Because in some ways, for instance, even when I edited Adi Parva, it's two levels of editing. One, you're looking at the art itself and you're looking at the frames and you're making sure it works. The other thing I do is I just ask for a Word file where we do frame 1, frame 2 kind of thing. And then I edit it almost as though if you weren't seeing the image, what were you getting of the text? Were you still able to make the story happen? And if there was a jump, then you went back and looked at the art and said, well, the art is resolving the gap and there is no need for any text to fill this. So then you edit it in the Word thing and then you go back and you edit it together with Word, text and image placed together. So it's a kind of 3-level editing.
So in the case of Adi Parva, what comes first? Did Amrita send you a proposal, or did you get the word first? Did you get the art?
If I remember right, I got a postcard first. The image that became the cover of the book. She was working on it and she made postcards that year for people, just friends, and she sent it out and it was stunning. And then she was talking about it, saying, I'm going to do this, and it's, the Mahabharata is endlessly interesting. So you're wondering what new, and the interesting thing is she started out by wanting to make Ashwathama the heart of the book. And she said, Ashwathama is one of the characters who's there forever, right? He knows everything. So she said, I'll make him the perspective. But then her own compulsions, I think, of taste and politics, it became very female-centric, very woman-centric, and the text evolved in that way. So it was a many years of going back and forth.
Okay, so now that everybody knows about comics and... Oh yeah, why comics? Why everyone? Okay, next question. So I'm going to get I'm trying to get in the heart of things, okay? Like, people, I think, try and skirt these things in a usual context in Litfest. Do you believe in the hype that is around comics in India today? As a creator, as a publisher, there's a huge hype. I think it's a hype. Like, everybody's talking about comics, so they're the next big thing. I can see it happening in the West, and I know why it's happening there. There are specific reasons why it's happening there. In India, we don't have the numbers. I don't believe we have the numbers to sustain, like, all of us. Like, I'm not Kartika, obviously, but, and you're at ACK, but people who are independent publishers, independent creators, there's no money to be made in comics. It's a very uphill battle. There's no distribution, but there's still this entire hula la about the thing. Do you believe in that hype?
From what I've seen at places like Comic-Con, no. I don't believe in the hype at all. I think a lot of people come to the cons for merchandise, for the experience of just kind of being in a different environment. I don't know how many of those people are actually readers of comics. I don't know how many of them buy them. Although I don't know how many of them download them online and read them there. There might be a, we don't know how many people do that, because
but then they're not downloading Indian comics for sure. I'm very sure about that.
Yeah, they're not downloading Indian comics.
So I'm talking Indian comics in that sense. But then you have a market of children coming every month to buy Tinkle Digest and Tinkle. And which is not ACK, because there, like you're discussing earlier, parents, so supposedly ACK basically sells 60 lakh copies of their comics every year. And that's mostly, I think, parents wanting to pass on tradition. I don't think the kids are picking up themselves.
Yeah, it's the parents, or it's people who want to complete their collections. They already have a lot of issues and they want
But with Tinkle, you're having readers write in to say they like stories, they don't like stories. So, but do you see, like, our children actually getting into comics, or is, like,
I'm not sure they look at Tinkle as a comic book. To them, I think it's an entertaining, fun magazine that they read, that their parents used to read. People then they know used to read, and it's been around for the last 30 years. So we have a very fierce, strong readership. So parents encourage kids, and then kids get into it, and they encourage their friends, and it's really difficult to say they're into it because they are comics. I think they're mostly into it because, it's a nice, fun magazine to read, and it's been around for a while.
Vidyan, as an independent creator who's, do you think that the hype is justified, or am I reading it completely wrong? Is there no hype? I mean, that's also possible.
As she said, I agree with her. If I look at Comic-Con, definitely not. The hype is completely false. I mean, you remember, we were at Bangalore Comic-Con and somebody came up to the stall that we were at and said, "Oh, comics! Wow." So, I mean, that should give you a pretty good indication of what spaces like that are meant for, which is primarily merchandise. But as someone who makes and publishes comics, I don't subscribe to the hype in terms of the publicity that we do for Captain Bijli and all the books, but I do feel that there is an interest in the medium. I don't know necessarily how much that translates into sales, but there is a definite curiosity about the medium, even if it is just limited to people who are in publishing, people who regularly read. They want to see what is possible in the medium, and they want to see what they can do with the medium as well.
And this wasn't there 5 years ago? Or?
I think that interest is growing, because that's something that, I mean, I can't say, like, I've only recently started meeting more and more people, so maybe it's my own network that's expanding, and that's why I feel this way. But I do find that there are more people who want to try their hand at comics in terms of from a creator's point of view. Quite a lot, because we've done an open call for a non-fiction anthology, and there's so many people who want to just bring out their work, and not necessarily people who have ever done it before.
I think that's a boom. That's a big boom. This comic thing is going to explode. All you guys beware. Okay. No, really, I do think it's going to explode, and it's not really going to be because of anything that I did, or I don't think any of us really. For me, when I was growing up, and even like 5 years back, it was difficult to explain who the comic heroes are. Now, if I go to Cochin and I ask around who the Avengers are, everybody knows who they are. They know the little fellows and everybody. So that first work of cutting through and getting the message across has already been done by the Hollywood movies. When you have something like Hollywood behind it, why are you worried? Like you go to any mall and at least one movie running there is a popular or alternative comic rendition. It's a make from a comic. So that work is already done, which means like we just have to like make good stuff, you know. People who are going to get it, like this whole population, you know, which all these Comic-Con fellows are like aiming at, angling at and all. Same population is being like, that is why the Hollywood movies are being released here at the same time and all that, right? So it's big. The scene is going to go, and from there people are going to get into mainstream comics with Superman leading and all that. But well, more readers then can decide to look at alternative comics, because like she said, like people going through Tinkle basically means that you are getting familiar with that format of storytelling. That is the first work to be done, you know. A lot of people have not been exposed to it as a kid, so they find it difficult to read in pictures.
There are a lot of parents, I mean people who are parents now, who grew up on Tinkle, who associate the comic medium with their childhood so strongly that they find it difficult to sort of see a graphic novel as a serious work, you know, a serious form of work. So that's there's that side to that. And as far as Avengers and all of that is concerned, the characters are popular, yes, but would people read comics about those characters is the question. Right.
They don't. I mean, even the West, I don't think the movie tickets actually convert to comic sales. They don't. Not
like per ticket or something, but I'm sure that it adds. In India, I'm definite it will add. You just need that Virgin Comics or somebody like that who will keep changing colors like that to come and like put out those comics. It'll go. When they were selling, it was going. They just released their own comics and thought that it'll sell like that. That was probably the mistake.
But then Karthika, I mean, but you're not doing, I mean, so
I think the boom is on, yeah?
No, I don't agree. There's no boom or anything.
Okay. I think there's, for me, I think comics is a long-term game. I mean, we're all comparing with, you know, like, if you go on, like, DC and Marvel, they've been around for 70 years, and now they're using the characters and doing that. I think what Apupan's doing, which we'll come to in a bit, I think is also that. The next question, I'm going to cover that. But, see, so that's superheroes, right? So, like, Apupan said, it's like everybody, Hollywood, everybody's like, you know, Batman, Superman, Avengers, everybody, but the kind of stuff that Harper does is not in that realm at all. So, okay, two questions. So, is there a boom, and why not?
Well, there is a lot of interest around Comic-Con. There's no doubt about it. Okay, so we'll come to that. And you know, I just checked that the last Comic-Con, for instance, we sold a lot more as a publisher with the whole list. I mean, we have books from the US and UK as well. But the sales are steadily going up, and we don't have the superhero stuff. We have more like the Buddha box set and all that, which sells really well. But there are increased sales. There are more people just getting to know about the form through Comic-Con, which, though it's a bit Bollywoody and you know, dress up, and they're all there to buy mugs and T-shirts and all of that. Granted, nevertheless, it's better than not having it, because it does bring some attention to it. So yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a boom yet. I'd like to see that reflected in sales before I say it's a boom. But it is also true that one doesn't look blank anymore when one hears, you know, we're publishing graphic novels. They look like, okay, I don't quite get this, but I know it exists. So we've at least got there. And there is the old world reader who says, I just don't read graphic novels. I just don't understand the form. So something like what you're doing is really laying the foundations for another generation that can read it. So I guess we just have slightly longer way to go before we can call it a boom.
Okay, I'm going to ask a question which people in your position don't answer usually, which is, so okay, you're talking about sales, right? We're talking about numbers. Like a book like Adi Parva, right? Curry obviously was a huge hit, I think, amongst Indian graphic novel standards. That set a standard. Amrita went to France. She did the residency there. I think I don't know if she's abroad. I think she's probably like quite well known too.
In France she did really well.
Right. Yeah. I'm sure that you guys must have done like a good print run on that.
Decent, not very big. I think at the end of the day, I don't think we've sold more than 6,000-7,000 copies yet.
But
that's very good by graphic novel standards, right? Especially of the non-superhero kind. So I'm not dissing that at all. But I'm just saying, surely it's good enough and to be selling a hell of a lot more.
Okay. So, but is that only in India, or did Adiparva go abroad too?
No, we did India, and we sold rights to France. So the French rights were sold to the French publishing house, which then continued to publish her.
But then, as compared to, let's say, Buddha, I think that's been like a huge thing.
That's huge.
Is that because I've heard people, so Buddha is basically this entire life history of Buddha by Osamu Tezuka, right? And it looks gorgeous on your shelf. It looks really great. So I've heard a lot of book readers and sellers tell me that people buy it in the set and they just keep it there and there. You know, so that's the latest thing. So people just keep it there, which might be true. But is it because of the recognition of the title? Is it because it was a manga thing? Or
I think it's also because it's a Buddha. Because there's a lot of people who like that non-fiction in that digestible form, and then they found that actually this comic work is not as enigmatic as a lot of comic work is or can be. It's fairly straightforward in the way it tells a story, and it's interestingly complex. And I once sent it to a couple who asked for a gift for their kids, and then they got really horrified in this. But look at all the bad words in it, you know. Now the thing is, people don't associate the Buddha narrative with any bad words or any irreverent telling. So I think that irreverence got a lot of people coming in who wanted to read about the Buddha but also wanted irreverent storytelling. So somewhere it captured
it's also
a mass
visually
market.
explicit, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. But cartoony, but visually explicit. Within you wanted to like...
Yeah, I just wanted to make, this is just my observation, is that we have a pretty curious case in India where there's already been a certain level of seriousness established with the graphic novel abroad. So you have bigger publishers that publish that kind of work. But then you also have people who are desperately trying to create a superhero culture as well. Whereas in the US, actually, I think the superhero culture came first, and then as a reaction, you had the underground movement in the 60s, at least in America. So I just want to comment that the market we have is kind of strange that way. It's working in a lopsided way, because the reason why comics are catching a lot of media attention is because of this seriousness, but there's also this other side that's trying to build up a superhero culture that's very strongly steeped in mythology.
Yeah, which brings me to the next question, which is something that I've puzzled as a publisher because I've stayed away from it completely. But it's something in a way in which all 4 panelists have actually dabbled in, and also, published books also. So, mythology. It's the biggest thing, yeah. I mean, everybody, like there's Meluha, and then every publishing lit fest you go to, there are people like, it's a huge bestseller, but I think nobody reads it. You look at like serious readers, I think. No, I think people read, that's why it's a bestseller, but I'm saying, like, if you look at that serious publishing person, they're like, have you read? Like, I could get like 2 pages and then I left it somewhere. So I'm saying, so that's the impression of Meluha, but that sells. And there's comics, and everybody's trying to do a Ramayana or a Mahabharata. Everybody. Except for very few people. There's ACK, you have your tradition, that's there. I can't deny it. I grew up, my entire mythology is on that.
It's sort of synonymous with, a lot of people come to us and say we all our mythology that we know is thanks to Amar Chitra Katha. So that's how it is.
And ACK is still bringing out more mythology titles too, right?
Yeah.
But there's never been, you can't speak for ACK, but I'm saying, like, is that a conscious effort? Like, why not try break that? Is there ever discussion to break that?
It's Amar Chitra Katha, I think the brand is a very pristine kind of brand. It stands for certain values. It stands for example, it would never have irreverent writing, or it would never have explicit art or anything. So it stands for a particular set of values, and that is what makes the brand special. So I don't think there's ever going to be a discussion about diluting that in any way.
Okay. Vidyan, when you worked in Power and your story Chilka, it still riffed on a mythological theme.
Yeah.
Why?
So it might kind of be the opposite of what ACK does, because so as part of when I make comics, my early interest was in developing stories within the Mahabharata. So creating your own characters and colliding them with the conventional narrative and subverting that in a way. So that's what we tried to do with Chilka, which was published in the Power anthology. So for me, it was kind of in fact, I grew up reading the ACK as well. No offense, but it was kind of a reaction to that. The fact that there can be a single narrative, one single way to look at mythology. And what me and my collaborator, Shohei, really wanted to do was to kind of introduce something of ourselves into that world. And that, I think, probably speaks to the primacy of something like ACK more than anything else, the fact that we wanted to react to that, because a lot of our discussions were, how do we make it not like ACK? I'm sorry, but that also speaks to the robustness of their market. Yeah.
The interesting thing about Apupan is that his that thing, yeah, okay. But he's created a mythology of his own, which I think is what, I would say that's what, if you look at the West, I think superheroes are actually their mythology, right? They don't have a mythology that way. They are like, and this is third book, but each book, if you look at it, is like grown in storytelling. He's creating his entire world and he's creating his own mythology, and the roots of it actually lie in ACK too. But I mean, for me, that's more fascinating as a creator, as a publisher, that you have the vision to basically say, okay, I want to create this entire world, because that's how you go about creating characters, than probably taking Ramayana and then putting, I'd say, Ram or Hanuman in, let's say, armor and then making him fight Asuras or big comeback with, even more powers. Because that's a direct riff of what DC and Marvel are doing in the West. Right? I mean, that's why so for me, Apupan's work that way, he's got that thing. He's creating a world, it's his own mythology. It's not some mythology which's been there for so long. Was that a conscious choice to create the mythology of the world?
Thanks, Pratik. It's nice to hear that Apupan has this mythology world and all that. No, that was the effort, but with one book you can't really say that you're building this fantasy universe and everything. With book 2 also, you can't really you can't really justify that. But I think with more books, yeah, slowly the world, and basically the things that interest are the interconnections between stories, characters who are coming in dreams and outside, and how like a reader can somewhat connect between all 3 books now. That's very interesting for me to create. I'm also a fan of like Ramayana, Mahabharata and all that. The name Hala Hala comes from my reading of ACK, where she was swallowing the poison, and there's an asterisk sign over there and it says Hala Hala poison, and I thought it was a really stupid name for poison. I thought it should be the name of a comic universe or something. So I said, okay, I'm going to make Hala Hala. So that world will get built more, but there's no like physical map to it and all. I want to keep it a place which changes according to the story also, because a fantasy world can do that, right? That's when it really comes through to the story, I think. And the effort is definitely to build that mythology, that world. Yeah, let's see, if I don't die soon or something, I'll make more things.
Kartika, why Simeon? Why Adi Parva? I mean, Adi Parva, okay, Amrita, she wanted to do Mahabharata. Why Simeon?
Simeon was entirely the artwork. It was, I fell in love with it. I knew it was Hanuman and I didn't really want to do the epic and the mythology again. But there was something about this guy's artwork. It was stunning, and he had no idea how to make it, how to control it, how to rein it in, how to make, there was all that stuff that you wanted to, but there's this energy exploding out of that artwork. And then he is very strong-willed, so he said, but I want it like this, I want the text to say this. And after a point you said, it's that first novel thing where you could only find that much balance in it. He wants to do it further on, and I can see already that when he's doing it the next time around, the second volume, the third, there's a different calmness to it. But it was just that. It was just love of the artwork. There's no other reason.
I met Vikram in I don't remember where, on a rooftop, like a place in CP. When I think he had already shown the work to you, but I was at Manta Ray then, and so he showed me, and I figured that the art is stunning. I'm not sure about the words and all that. Yeah. So this is something I think that I've seen in comics, is people pick up the book because the art is really supreme, and art. But as a reader, I think it is always the story that drives it, and it's and I've never faced it. So even when we get submissions for work, if we don't like the story, we're small enough, and I think we can say, see, we either help writers write a better story, or we tell them, see, your story has to be strong. It's not purely the art, because I've seen so many friends of ours who pick up like a book which is gorgeously drawn, and they read the story and it's just good for the art. There's no story in it. So and that's something I've faced.
Yeah, I think that when the Simeon final volume gets done, then the story will be actually done in the right way. It's also because he stopped halfway, and we all know the story of Hanuman. We know how he went and sat on the tree and looked at the ring and what he took back to Ram, etc. But the very fact that he was looking at the entire story from from the simian point of view. And he did interesting things. He made it baboon, for instance. He worked with that rather than a rhesus, and there were just little quirky things in it which made you go back and look at the entire thing again. So I figure he's doing exactly what, in a way, graphic fiction does do, which is to stretch things a bit, to push the boundaries a bit, to make you read something and then say, I read it differently this time. And that, I think, Simian has succeeded in doing.
But do you think...
I think you just switched it.
Okay, but do you think mythology is like a... Like, are we, like when Apupen and we consciously are saying mythology is not a thing, we're not going to mythology.
I'm afraid I agree. I don't particularly want to do that either.
No, but
I mean, to stay with that world.
No, from a pure sales, marketing, looking at Meluha and all that, is that like...
No, if
Business of graphic novels, yeah. I'm kind of business, like pure business of graphic novels. Like, is that something that...
Then one would go down the comic route, right? Not the graphic novel route.
You mean like singles?
I would say, yeah. And do the quick short books, the Raj Comics route, and actually make a lot of money on it, I'm presuming.
But with mythology as your core.
Okay, so this is the way I see it, okay? So if I have to publish graphic novels, then I see it as my little space where it's very snobbishly literary and wonderful, and there's no compromise on any aspect. The artist gets to do what they want to do. The production does not suffer. You do everything you can. You take your low margins on it. But how many graphic novels can you do in a year anyway? How many even come to you that you want to publish? So you do the 2 a year. You do them beautifully. You do them for pleasure as much as for anything else. And at the end of the day, as the movement goes on, I think they will sell and they will earn out.
But do you see... I'm coming back. So you're like the...
bad person on this panel.
No. I mean, definitely not. I mean, for us, as in for at least small publishers like Vidyun and myself, I think we're trying to learn also what does Harper see. You know, like how do you guys see it? Like, see, you've obviously got advantages which we don't have. It's like you've got your distribution network and all that, which is fine. But so you're doing like 2-3 books a year. But do you see the space growing? I mean,
yeah, I see the space growing. For instance, for the first time in our publishing history, we did a translation from French, which we've never done of any book, but Kabul Disco.
Oh, right, yeah. Oh,
yeah, so Kabul Disco we found through Amrita. Actually, most of the books we publish come from graphic novelists themselves recommending work. And Amrita met this young man, Nicolas Wilde, in France. And she said, he's got such a lovely book. Will you want to look at it? And I don't read French, so I sent it to a friend in Bangalore who reads French, who gave me a summary of it. And then we said, let's try it. So he got a translator friend of his to do some. We negotiated the French publisher, we bought rights, and we published it, and it did very well. And we reprinted it. Then we done volume 2 now, and we're going to continue doing it. There's 3 and 4 to come. So it's also really done something different for us as publishers. No, it was done in French, and the English volume only exists here. The English edition only exists here. In India, that's it.
Oh, nowhere else in the world?
No.
Wow. Oh, that's quite cool.
We tried to sell rights. Nobody bought them.
No, because that's very interesting, because I'm saying we all believe that there isn't a market for comics so much. We're basically trying to build a community and all of that. And you're coming and telling us that there's one book which in English is existed only in India and nowhere else in the world.
And I'll tell you a little story, which is a complete digression, nothing to do with business. But on the first edition of Kabul Disco, there's this shot of this woman in a hijab, and she's dancing with this soldier-like person on the gun, okay, like a big... So a bookshop in Kabul wanted copies because they said Kabul Disco, and it's non-fiction, it's set in Kabul. So they asked for a sample, we sent it to them. And they said, oh my God, this woman in a hijab is dancing on the cover on a gun and so on. So they spray painted the cover black. But they sold it. They sold those few copies of it. Then we reprinted for them with a different cover. with another woman or man on the cover, now I forget. And we gave it to them. But that was interesting.
Okay, I like how this is going, because you guys are leading 2 questions that I have, which is censorship. Okay, we just again, so because we did this small thing between ourselves in different places, I've already got an idea what they're looking at. So there's censorship in comics. What we've faced, and like, for example, what we've done at Mantare and Kokachi is we're very irreverent. We don't care about what censors think, because nobody's reading comics yet. All the guys who basically, want to, are basically giving court cases or threatening people with life sentences aren't reading comics yet, right? But then I think when you work in a corporate house, I think the rules are slightly different. This is primarily to Shreya and Kartika, because I know instances. So in your case, for example, because you have a particular age group, And like we were discussing today, a certain cover doesn't, they want certain things. Do you do a lot of self-censorship?
We have, we're now more attuned to what is required for the magazine. But initially, for example, when I came to Tinkle, I had to rein myself in, because you're dealing with children and you're dealing with a brand that stands for particular values. It is considered as safe for children. Parents buy it because they think it is safe for children, etc. And the backlash that you can get if something goes off, in the magazine, the backlash that you can get is quite strong. So you have to be very careful about certain things, like no bad words, or you can't show a character using a weapon. You can show the weapon in the panel, for example, and you can show characters fighting physically, but they can't be using a weapon.
Which is really ironical, because in the sister company you have people's heads chopped off and everything.
But then
right?
Amar Chitra Katha, Amar Chitra Katha is for it's actually for adults. I mean, it's more for people of all ages, rather, I would say.
So all ages, we read it as kids. I'm saying, right? Okay, so that's interesting. Kartika, in Chester Brown, there is a entire round of self-censorship that happened. Is it again? These are tough questions, or but basically, I'm just curious why, because I've not bothered to do that.
So Chester Brown's graphic novel, Paying for It, is something that was published in the West first. It's a book in which it's a story of this man who goes out to find sex, pays for it. That's why the paying for it. He doesn't have a relationship that works, so he decides that he will go and find paid sex only. So there's a series of encounters with women, and there's lots of explicit pages. It's not erotic, it's not titillating. It's a very cerebral text in an odd way. It's not about showing the body to excite anyone. It's like a reflection of what goes on in a man's head about sex and sexuality.
And even his drawing is not erotic at all.
Not at all. Yeah. But there we had a problem, because there was so many frames with this guy lying there naked with an erection, and it was like frontal up there, and our printer said to us, "I'm sorry, I can't print this. This is not right." I mean, like, oh really? We didn't think about it, because then we asked around a bit, we asked our lawyer, and she came back with a fairly sensible opinion in which she said, look, legally, I don't know if there's a problem here, because then I called Ravi DC actually, because he had done a Kama Sutra edition, a new Kama Sutra edition, in which he had these illustrations of men and women doing things on the side kind of thing. And they were fairly explicit, though modern. So he said that they looked at the law, and there is a separate law for ancient classical, such explicitly the Kama Sutra, and there's a separate law for modern art or text that can offend, which is as loose as anything else. So he said you cannot use the Kama Sutra to justify this. The lawyer said, look at it sensibly, this is a comic book. What kind of people are you selling to? You're selling into bookstores where very little understanding exists on the shop floor guy's mind of what is what. She said this guy definitely in some stores is going to pick up this book which looks exactly like a children's comic book because it's a comic book, and he's going to put it in the children's section. And children are going to walk up there, they're going to look at this, there's going to be shock and horror and awe. And what are we going to do about this? So we thought about it and we said, look, it is self-censorship, but it's not damaging the text in any way if we don't show an organ, frontal all the time. It could be concealed or sort of blurred out or something, and the story doesn't change. Nothing is affected. So we went back to Chester, who has a reputation of being a rather crusty man. But he said, I would rather be published and read than this, so let's just look at a way to do this. And so we sort of did some computer work on it.
Yeah, okay. No, this is cool. I mean, the thing I think as publishers we try and figure out is, okay, so who creates the issue? Where do you decide, okay, don't show all of those things? Right?
Self-censorship, but I think in this case I was more amused than anything else, because there were enough frames left untouched also.
Right.
And
it's really nice because you get it at a really cheap price. Yeah, the book.
Well, that has nothing to do with self-censorship.
Yeah, but the fact that you brought it out even with the censorship, it makes that available, because the Chester Brown book next to it costs $1,600. And yours is at
$599.
No,
it's lesser than that.
It's lesser than that. $395 or $495. Yeah.
Okay. No, I mean, it's just so this is about skipping from going to question. Ebooks, or everybody is on ebooks, right? The one of the big disappointments I think I personally have as a publisher, and I think they might also agree, is that nobody's basically come out with a system where you can read comics on mobile phones, because the squeeze thing doesn't work. Even American publishers have tried it with a panel view, which doesn't work again for comics. So even when everybody, like in each conference, somebody comes up with an ebook solution, these things actually don't work for images or that kind of thing. But I think ACK is now getting into a digital platform, right?
The Amar Chitrakatha app, which is available on Windows 8 tablets, and again tablets, because mobile phones we haven't yet found a way to do it. So Windows 8 tablets, Android tablets, and Apple.
iPad, yeah.
So we have an app there, and we give away free comics, and people can buy and read.
Do you see
ACKs.
traction there? Does it?
Oh yes.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah, a lot of people. I mean, apart from having a collection on their bookshelf, they also want to kind of have it at their fingertips.
But is this from people who are abroad? Do you?
No, there are a lot of people here in India that want to have downloaded the app, and also because there are like 5 free ACKs, so you can.
Okay.
Yeah, you get 5. No, not the physical copy, e-copy, but yeah.
Within Apupan, did you guys ever try? I'm sure you haven't tried an ebook version, but did you try? Would you?
For me, it's a different medium. For me, a comic book is a printed book.
No.
I know that that's a very traditional view to take, but I find that if my priority right now is content generation, right? So which is why we did dogs, and which is why we're doing the non-fiction thing, and which is why I'm doing the rest of my work. And for me, the easiest way to do that, because of the way I've been functioning, is to think in the comic book format and to create in the comic book format. If somebody wants to adapt that into an ebook format, that's okay. But for me, I'm a purist in that respect at the moment. Who knows, in 5 years, maybe not. Yeah. If someone can come up with a reader which doesn't dilute the joy of the medium and the page turns and the few things that make it what it is. Sorry, I know I'm sounding very like... No, but these are very regular things to say, but they're very important when you're making the comic. That experience of turning the page, that experience of the color is really important when you're a creator.
I'm also very romantic about the page and all that. But I don't want to jump in and do the first thing that's come up or anything. I'll wait for a while and see what works best, and then Karthika will tell me you got to get onto this, and then we'll go on to that. That's all. I'm not very pro with it, so. Huh?
No, I was just saying that it's time already. But seriously, we are in the process of converting our graphic novels into, it is more expensive to even get it right. So the price point you may end up having to give on the reader is higher. But I think by January, February, we'll have some books up.
Your graphic books on digital are going to be more expensive than the print books.
Not more than the print books, thankfully, because the cost of the printing is not obviously there. But if we were going to do a new graphic novel and we were going to put in the cost of the conversion, because it's going to be one costing.
Mm-hmm.
So when we do a cost,
Okay, so business, guys, I mean, who are here for the business, this is the...
No, I'm just saying when we do the costing for a book, we cost it as this is what it's going to cost us to print it and all the rest of the costs. And now we're going to have to add the conversion cost to it, because there'll be one form going out to the digital and one going to press to be printed. So when you do that, then you might just end up taking the price up across the board. Both might end up being a little higher than now. But I think that will be a matter of time before it gets cheaper.
So basically your price point in the physical book is going to has to compensate for these two costs.
Because we don't have the numbers on ebooks yet. So if we're going to sell a few hundred copies and we can't project a sales number onto it, then it'll have to get loaded onto the physical. Again, this is not something we've done yet, but I imagine that's how we'll go ahead.
See, the thing is, abroad, for example, comics is seeing a huge resurgence purely because of the fact that it's available on digital. And when it came out like a few years back, everybody was really scared the way print publishing is scared in India today, because they thought the print is basically going to die and the digital is going to go up. But what has happened is that because of the movies and Hollywood and all of that, and because these things are available like at your fingertips, people could download like the first issue of Avengers and see if they liked it, which is, and I think some of the publishers price it at much cheaper than the print versions. And then they get hooked and they either come on the digital platform or they come on the print platform. Yeah. So we did experiment called Mixtape, which is purely on print. It's just PDFs that people could download. We priced it $55 and told them it's the price of a coffee, so why didn't you? We saw like decent numbers. Decent, I'm saying, is 200 numbers. Okay, for us like a small press, it's like decent numbers. The interesting thing is we did this and then we said, okay, let's try print, and we did print, and we've like sold probably 1,500 copies by now of Mixtape. So which is why I was asking, like, as creators, you know, like it's just a question of your same PDF file, you probably make a low res thing and you put it up on some platform to sell, and people might get it from there. Like the people that I've seen who've actually printed the entire book in their own printing machine because we hadn't brought a print copy out. So for us that was like quite cool to do. And but yeah, the platform, like, so but then what ACK brings out is, like you're saying, is selling so many titles. That means that there is a readership for comics in India. Because I used to think that not so many people have a tablet to read a comic on.
And a lot of people also subscribe to Tinkle magazine online. So we're on Maxter at the moment. Okay. So a lot of people go there and subscribe there instead because it's much cheaper online
than the printed version.
Print,
but
yeah.
Tinkle anyway is not priced high, right?
Yeah, but it's even cheaper to subscribe online than it is to get a physical subscription.
Okay. I think one thing that I'd like to speak to Vidyan, and I don't know if Tinkle does this, but do you guys do a community building for comics, like for amongst your readers? Do you have, like I think both of us, and I think Apupan did at one point for his earlier book, where you do an exhibition because you've got things to show. It's not a printed book where you do. So in print books earlier, at least a lot of publishers used to put a lot of interest into getting publishers and launches and all that. We do a different kind of thing. Does Tinkle or Harper, do you guys ever try and do like community building around your graphic novelists, or how does marketing work for both of you? Like beyond the fact that you are
so ACK does a lot of events and launches and things like that. Tinkle does its community building online, so on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and all of that. That's how we tap into it.
Kartika, do you guys do?
We don't have any sustained platform like that. Actually, with us, the thing's different because we have very what you called high-profile graphic novelists on the list. So someone like Apupan does a book, the media gets there, the reviews appear, people talk about it. So we tend to do the publicity around the writers, whether it's Amrita or him or the others, rather than, and of course, like Chester Brown gave us an opportunity to take the censorship story and talk about what's all right, what's not. So you try and do the media stories around subject and author rather than the whole thing. But I wish, and I think we should be doing more. So hopefully we will.
That I'm proceeding with the comic art exhibition thing. I think each book that I do, I will follow up with some comic art, as in the exhibition of the art. It's not doing okay. I think it's a way to just again spread that idea of comics through. Taking it into a gallery has its own things, which I've been discovering also. The page is really small, so in a gallery people come in expecting to see some art they don't understand, but then suddenly hear some stupid comic, like, you know, I understand, but I don't want to laugh loud. I want to like pretend like I'm appreciating high art, or, you know, that thing is there still. But I'm trying to mix up some large format canvas paintings from Asperus and from other books and all, and include it in the comic art exhibition, because I think there's a way there for it to just spread itself, you know. It's not really community building like you said, but yeah.
I'm curious about how Harper chooses, how do you choose which graphic novel to publish? Do you get a lot of submissions like you do with print?
No, we don't get. We get a very few submissions actually. It's mostly by people recommending stuff, or someone like Apupan whose work you're already familiar with, so when it turns up and you're going to just grab it. But not too many random unsolicited submissions.
Okay. What are challenges? Like I'm saying, if somebody wanted to start a publishing house, or just from your experience, what's been the challenge in this entire medium?
The costing obviously is one of the big problems, especially when there's color. and you want to use the best paper, you want to get the best price on it, then it's always in conflict, because you would want the best production, then you might as well be prepared to put a high price. Adiparva is $7.99, and if we actually had to make the margins we should be for every book, then we should have been pricing it at over $1,000. So you have to then take that call and say, but you know this is probably the optimal price for it, and go for that. You'd rather sell than not sell. So the costing is a big thing. And second, I think it is also about bridging that gap between what we are persuaded should be published and read and what readers see as readable content. It's constantly having to communicate the fact that graphic fiction or non-fiction, there is a certain way to read it, that it's all right to sell it in a certain way, that you have to keep innovating that process. Because think about it, salespeople are not used to seeing very successful graphic fiction or non-fiction. Marketing people are not used to seeing that it sort of takes off when you do 5 ads in a paper. Everything about it goes a bit against the grain. So you have to find your way through that process to prove that it's valuable to your own team, to everyone associated with it. And that communication itself has been a challenge, but I think we're past it now. I think now when you say graphic novel, everyone is just quite excited about it. So that is the third final thing is actually editing. I think you need to have the right people in-house who love, understand, and are passionate about it. And if that passion isn't there, I think it'll just be customary publishing. It won't be special. That's why I said Ajita is important.
No, I'm saying so we've got like 5 minutes, I think. So, no, as a creator, you obviously have a sweet deal because you were picked up by Bluft and then you come to Harper and you're actually quite settled there. As a creator, I think that's the best deal you can ask for because you got one of the biggest publishers in India who's got a huge distribution network to support you. You've built a volume of work, but are there still challenges? Like for example, your challenge is that the books don't make money for you to survive. Despite all of this, I'm saying they don't, right?
I haven't taken it as a challenge.
But how do you, no, I'm saying, so the entire,
it's just not selling. All of you go out and buy my books and make me live on it or something. It's a really small scene. So like she said, like it has to go a long way. And that's what we're looking at, like this whole Hala Hala mythology and all that. It's a slightly long-term plan. And the name Apupan also is a long-term plan, you know. I have to get to that Apupan state some point soon. So, but we have to concentrate on getting out good stuff, production, all that. That's it.
But as work, so what I've experienced is that, like I was discussing earlier, is that you do a lot of original work with the long-term thing, but what happens is you get a lot of commission projects because of people seeing your work, which is the way how you're working as an independent artist also, right? Because people see the work and then they...
It's not really from comics that comes, no. I've been doing some murals and pub paintings and all, and it mostly comes from there. I try to not get very commercial with the comic.
For Captain Bijli, community is very important. It's like Prateek said, community driven primarily. I mean, I've never really heard the term mini comics before, but I trust you that it's it's a genuine phenomena. For me, the reason I started a publishing project, there was a semi-mandate which you'll see at the back of our books, is to bring out new content and to expand the number of people who are involved in the making and the reading of comics, and also to challenge the medium to a degree as much as possible. So for that, it's not so much with dogs because we weren't so actively editing that one, but for me it's the practice of making comics that's really important. So the process of it, there's a certain amount of a missionary kind of aspect to that, but I feel like it's very important to bring new people into the fold of a medium, and that's kind of what a lot of our activity is and where most of the time goes into, which is helping people enter into a medium that they probably don't have that much experience with. Other than that, I think one of the things that I found really successful in terms of building a community around the sales of comics is institutional tie-ups. So with dogs, all the profits go to an animal shelter, so they also push that. So that kind of specialized marketing is something that I think you can really achieve, that you can really sell a lot of. If your aim is to bring several comics out there, that kind of partnership is really beneficial.
Challenges that you faced, if you'd like to add to that, you could, but yeah, no. So challenges that you faced, Shreya, so.
I think the biggest challenge for me as the editor of Tinkle Digest is to walk that middle path where I have to really please the readership, the loyal readership that we have, and keep Tinkle's core values while at the same time making it more contemporary, making it fresh, modern, something that children today will like to read and will continue to read, because a lot of the times what happens is that we have parents who write to us saying, you know, Tinkle isn't the way it used to be. When I used to read it, it used to look different. It was much more innocent. It was this, that, and the other. And we want it like that. Why isn't it like that, you know? And it's very difficult to explain to them, you know, today's 12-year-old is actually a 15-year-old or whatever, you know, they're much older than you were when, you know, you were that age. So I think that's the biggest challenge.
Well, of course, funds are a challenge for any indie publisher. That will always remain a challenge. Another challenge that I see is, I mean, this I've only come to realize is, I find people don't necessarily know how to read comics or how to perceive them. They apply a lot of parameters to them, which you would probably apply to a prose novel. But a graphic novel can be read differently, can be processed differently, can be understood differently. So for people to be able to review them and for the dialogue around comics to be something that's meaningful and directional, I feel like there needs to be, well, I mean, no one's going to do sensitization workshops or whatever, but hopefully in time people will understand that the medium needs to be gauged slightly differently, because what it's trying to do is also slightly different. So that I feel is a more long-term challenge for people who are in it for the long haul. In terms of immediacy, yeah, I mean, if we all had more money, we'd all be like selling more comics. But yeah.
Okay, so it's open for, I think that's my last question to the entire panelists.
I think the panel, comes with different skill sets. There's a big time publisher whose bread and butter is only comics, and then there's a niche, and then there's a private artist. I just want to understand, what are your typical production workflows? Do you actually do that completely on computer? You said you did it on pencil, and then how do you translate it? How does it all sort of differ in different constructs?
So we have a team of in-house writers and artists, as well as freelance writers and artists, who then first we get the script, and then we edit the script, we send it to the right artist. You have artists. There are some artists that work purely digital. There are others who do hand-drawn work and all of that. That comes together. It goes through a very rigorous editing and production process. There's a team of about 25 people that work on Tinkle, and we're on a monthly cycle. So things have to happen very quickly. We work obviously 3 months in advance to kind of keep to our deadlines. So that's basically it.
So eventually it all moves to a digital sort of format?
Yes, it does. It's all eventually all goes digital, yes.
Our cycle is slow. We come out with maybe one book in a year, in 6 months. But it's usually, we work with independent creators. They each have their own process. At most, what we would do is connect an artist and an illustrator who we think work well together. And then what's slowly becoming part of it is to introduce people who are not familiar with comics to existing comic book artists. So like holding workshops with them, getting them in touch with them so that they know how comics are actually made and what that is. So that, I mean, to me it's kind of a deviation from a typical production process, but important if one wants to see new content out there.
Cycle gets even slower. Usually it takes at least 6 months before a story is kind of set in my head after the first storyboarding with just pencil. I don't, unless it's a complex idea that I need to like write it down in text, it's usually just in scribbles or something. I think more visually, I think. Then the pencil work on the final, at least A3 size. Now I'm getting a little bigger than A3. I'm trying to make it bigger than A3, the original. So you reduce it to the comic size for print and it retains a lot of detail. So the pencil in that size with like proper layout and everything. And once you're happy with that, inking with pen. Then I'd scan the original, or if it's watercolor or something, if it has color, then I do that also. So I have to see that it's waterproof ink that I'm using, and then scan it. And InDesign, there's Adobe InDesign, and I put it together as a book there. And once I'm ready with it, I send it to Harper.
And then there are others who work differently. So sometimes we might get the, like with Adi Parva, there was big artwork to be drum scanned page after page, and you did the color corrections in press, and it was at that level. At the same time, we would work with the high-res images and create the InDesign file, which somebody like a freelancer would sit and lay it all out page by page. And at the end of it, very often it happens like you did going to the press here. If you were printing there, then whether it's Arnath or Vishwajyoti or whoever, they go and sit in the press and they watch each page as it comes out the first time, make the corrections. There's that whole sort of hand-holding process that happens there. And only after they've signed off on it does the actual book get printed.
So do you also use InDesign?
We use InDesign. And I forgot to mention, first there's the script, and then the pencils, and then the inks, and then the coloring, and the lettering, and then finally the it all comes together as one thing, and then it goes through several proofs. And so which is why you need such a large team, because you have 2 inkers, you have 2 letterists, you have a couple of colorists who then work on the artwork.
Any attempt on sort of streamlining fonts there? It's all free form?
Fonts? What fonts? If there is any text, I'd like to handwrite it with a brush. Yeah.
But several of these graphic novelists have fonts that have been made to their handwriting. So then there's a font made, and so it looks like handwriting, and it's based on their own handwriting, but it's a font.
There's actually a font called comic font, so we just use that.
Hi, you spoke earlier about whether there was a boom or not in graphic books, and do you think a boom or a kind of perception of a boom might be to do with the fact that you're moving away from the term comic and talking much more about graphic books, and therefore recognizing what I've encountered as a much greater emotional depth to these books than I would first perceive? I remember a book last year which was a graphic novel which was about a woman's experiences with cancer, and it was about her husband and her, and it did very well. And for the first time in my experience as a reader, I realized quite what this form was capable of. Do you think that part of the perceived boom is just people coming into this format? And it not necessarily being funny.
No, I'm just thinking that actually the graphic novel narrows it here. The comic is the bigger word that is bringing people to it.
Okay.
The boom is around the comic. The boom is, if there is one, is not around the graphic novel. That is seen as a high-end literary equivalent of the mass market novel.
Okay.
So is that?
Hi, I have 2 questions actually. The first question is, if you're a writer, how do you meet illustrators? Do you just hang out at places where artists hang out, or? Okay, and the second question is, why don't Indian artists market themselves something like, it's not necessarily graphic novelists I'm talking about, something like Cyanide Happiness did. What they did was they came up on internet, and that's how everyone knows. Cyanide and Happiness on Facebook and everything. Why don't we see Indian artists doing something similar? Not necessarily that offensive, but...
Actually, I put my stuff on the net and then I got published.
Your first question about meeting artists. I think now everybody hangs out on Facebook, so you don't have to go physically. Yeah, but I think, see, the typical thing about what I think writers don't realize is that it's easy to say it was a stormy night. It's a lot more difficult to actually draw a stormy night convincingly by an artist. No, I definitely think that writers basically don't value, like I've a lot of people come and say, I want to meet a artist, I've got a story, but obviously artists aren't, and they're mostly freelancers, they've got to do other stuff also. So the way to meet writers, well, we connect, and like Captain Mitri does, we connect writers to artists. But if you're an independent writer, then the basic thing is you figure out an artist whom you like, and if you're planning to pitch to a publisher like Harper or Penguin or one of them, then you put the pitch document together. But for that, you have to be willing to basically pay the artist something. And the second question is also about money, I think. See, so Cyanide and Happiness, I'm saying, when you talk about Cyanide and Happiness, people putting out work online, and I also wondered, because the kind of quality that artists abroad do in the web comics and not Cyanide and Happiness, I mean, it's easy to say it's just scratch stick figures, but the kind of humor and what they do in XKCD, for example, is far beyond, like, some of the, the comics that we bring out in India. But I'm saying, for them, it's, these guys either have a day job or they're all in for the long game. One of the things that I've seen in Comic-Con and I've seen amongst new publishers in India is that you see the Hollywood boom and you come down and think, oh, let's also make superhero characters which will be into a Bollywood film and a game and all of that. It doesn't work that way. People have a really long-term game if you're getting into comics. Like, we are in comics for the long term. You can talk about ACK selling 60 lakh copies today because they've been here for 30, how many, more than that, right? Harper has such a big catalog, Apupan's mythology thing. The world, it takes a long time, and all these comics online, I think they're in for the long game.
Can I just add that, and publishers actually are constantly also looking on the net for content like that. We're just publishing this book, The Vigil Idiot. So that came off, people loving it on social media, going back, and then finally there's a book coming off that. So I think the net is a great space to hang out and meet everyone, publishers and artists.
What about converting existing texts into graphic novels? I think Harper did with Alchemist. And are you doing more, or does not is that interest?
We're actually in the middle of a project on Tagore. And this is interestingly with the Jadavpur University. They are creating a comic book project where they are connecting text to different artists. They're doing workshops with them. So my colleague Ajita had gone to Jadavpur the other day. They sat and did a couple of days of that. It should be interesting to see how it turns out. It has been done in the past, of course. But I don't think anything in India has really taken off yet.
But doesn't language become an issue, like Tagore's language?
Tagore, there's a lot of really good dramatic text out there. So I think we could really do a good job of it. The stories,
Doesn't get lost?
No, I mean, I'm hoping it won't. We'll find out.
You've talked of the graphic novel and the comic. What about the Japanese? Yes.
Manga.
I mean, how do you compare the three?
Yeah.
I'd like to have a good understanding of what's the difference. How do you distinguish the three?
I can maybe attempt at answering that because I work with a manga artist a lot. For one, manga has more genres than I think we can ever dream of. At least not in the immediate present. It's a highly developed market, and in fact, the seed of a lot of animation and movies in Japan is comics. So it's not. Sorry.
Even Hollywood.
Yeah, well, even Hollywood, but in Japan, I think it's at kind of like a hyper level. They actually come out with thick volumes every week, just comics, and it'll be very cheaply printed and available to everybody. Formally, some of the differences that I can identify would be the action lines, the way that they're used, the way sound is used in manga, the way panels are designed. That's very different, and a lot of it is. I mean, now there are experiments with Yoshihiro Tatsumi and Adrian Tomine and stuff like that, but it's very, very well suited to an action adventure kind of a mode. So you'll find very dynamic page layouts, very sharp-edged panels, very fast action lines, and the sound effects, like, it's like a different universe altogether, because I think they take onomatopoeia to another level. No, I mean not sound. Yeah, but in comics we have printed sound, right? So how do you make that something that somebody feels more easily? So, for example, when I was working with Shohei on Chilka, we'd actually, like, we didn't want to do the regular thud and dash and boom. So we'd come up with alternate sounds. So then he was in Japan at the time, I'd have to type it in on Gtalk, and then he'd say it out to himself there. And then he'd be like, okay, this is fine. Then he'd send me something, and then I'd say it out to myself. So it has to be something that works for your market, actually. Because we wanted to print it in, Penguin was publishing it in India. So obviously we had to make sure the sounds were something that would work for an Indian market. Versus what he was used to was a Japanese sound. So you have to think of language as well, and what would be common to all the languages that you're catering to. So it's pretty exciting. Oh, right, yeah, that's the most important part. They start from the end. Sorry.
They start from the end.
They do. They start from the back of the book. Yeah. For us, yeah. So they start from the back of the book and they read, right to left.
And it can be really confusing if you're reading it online. It can be really confusing. Which way do I start?
Yeah, sorry. So we deal with serious themes. So even a small booklet, like one of the books that we did was Hush, and it dealt with child sexual abuse, but everybody started calling it graphic novel, and it's not. It's like it's a comic book. It's a graphic novella at best, So, but then everybody likes to say comics is for kids, so you try to trash the medium also. But I think someone who loves the medium says it's comics, whether you call it fancy as graphic novel or not, it's comics at the end of the day. I think that's the way I see it.
We need to close this session so that
As Vidita, Cool. So thank you everybody, Shreya, Vidyun, Apupan, and